thinking in terms of evolutionary psychology, how and why the mind evolved to be the way it is, how would you think about something like beauty, right? So a common aphorism is that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I'm wondering what someone like you makes of a statement like that. And I know that in the book, you give a really interesting ecological example that ties into this that had to do with something called a jewel beetle. So what's going on there?
That's right. So from an evolutionary point of view, attractiveness is an evolved feature. And our ability to detect attractiveness is an evolved feature. And so when I look at somebody and in that initial half-second initial glance, I often will get a hit. Everybody gets a hit, of the attractiveness of the person. And it's not, even if you're not trying to do it, you just see it. You just automatically see it. We're wired up to make these evaluations automatically. And what's really going on there, what is it that makes you automatically see someone as more attractive than someone else? From an evolutionary point of view, what you're doing unconsciously is one of the most sophisticated computations of your entire life. You're bringing in, through your senses, many, many visual, auditory, smell, and other cues about that person, dozens of cues, and you're doing an extremely important computation with all those cues. You're using those cues to estimate the reproductive potential of the person in front of you. What is the probability that this person could have or successfully raise kids, or have and successfully raise kids? And so that's not conscious. In the general case, you're not conscious of that, but that's what this is all about. So it's really an estimate of the reproductive potential of the person in front of you. Now, of course, to really know that, you would have to know exactly what is the health of the person, because if the person has cancer, terminal cancer, well, their reproductive potential is very little. If they have certain genetic defects, the reproductive potential is less, and so forth. So, but you can't see if they have cancer cells. You can't read their DNA. So you have to use other cues, and so you use cues like the quality of the skin, some features of the eyes, something called the limbal ring that we could talk about if you wish, something that we looked at in my lab. There are dozens of these cues that you're automatically looking at, and they won't all tell the same story. So you are sophisticated enough to look at the cues and look at the ones that say this person has high reproductive potential versus the ones that say no, they don't, and to adjudicate all of those and come up with a final answer. And that final answer you feel as the degree of attractiveness, from very, very attractive to less attractive. And so that's just one idea about how evolutionary psychology evaluates these things. Most of us think, that person looks great or not, and don't realize that there's this very sophisticated computation going on. And it was this framework of evolutionary psychology of attractiveness that actually led me and my graduate students to study something called the limbal ring in the eye, and to show that feature of the eye is among the dozens or hundreds of cues that are picked up unconsciously to evaluate attractiveness.
So let's dwell on the eyes for a moment. The eyes are really interesting in the context of human behavior because, A, we're very visual organisms. We're visual primates. A lot of our brain real estate is devoted largely to vision. People intuitively, naturally, automatically fixate on one another's eyes, right? It tells us a lot of information about where someone is looking. People are often very attracted to someone's eyes as opposed to other people's eyes, and they may or may not sort of even be able to articulate what they're attracted to. And there's a lot of interesting information there that people often subconsciously exaggerate through various cultural mechanisms. So you mentioned one feature of the eye, and I'm wondering if you could just kind of point out for people, what are some of the things that people are, consciously or not, evaluating in another human being's eyes, and what is it that actually tied to in terms of the underlying biology?
Well, there's a lot that we look at in the eyes. We probably look at the human face more than any other object in our lifetime, and we look at the eyes more than any other part of the human face. So we spend a lot of time looking at people's eyes, and so it's not a surprise that there are a lot of features of the eyes that affect our estimates of the attractiveness, the reproductive potential of a person. So, and it differs. Female evaluations of male attractiveness look at the eyes differently than male evaluation of female attractiveness in the eyes. So for example, you want to look for signs of youth, right? Because one feature that declines with age is your reproductive potential. As you hit 40, 50, 60, the reproductive potential drops off. And so if you're too young or too old, your reproductive potential declines. And so there's going to be an optimal age range. And so you're really trying to estimate, attractiveness is related to that optimal age range. So, and it turns out that youth is more critical in females than males in terms of reproductive potential, right? The females have a shorter window of reproductive potential than males. And so these are the kinds of selection pressures that females will not be as pressured to look for youth in a male as males will be pressured by selection to look for youth in females. And so here's a few concrete examples then. If you look at a baby's face, the eyes are a big part of that face, right? They have a small face, but they have big eyes. And as we get older, the ratio of the size of the eyes to the whole size of the face declines. So larger eyes are a sign of youth. And so male ratings of female attractiveness are enhanced if the eyes are made a little bit big. So makeup that makes the eyebrows a little bit bigger, that puts eyelashes, that emphasizes the eyes and makes them look a little bit bigger, will make females look more attractive. Males with eyes that look too big will look boyish and therefore not interesting. So there's going to be a big difference there. Pupil diameter. So your pupils dilate and contract. If there's not enough light, they dilate. If there's a lot of light, they contract. But they also dilate and contract due to your emotions. And if you find someone attractive, your pupils can dilate. And so male ratings of female attractiveness go way up if the picture of the female has dilated pupils. The more dilated, the better. Males find that very, very attractive.
And are you
Females,
saying? Are you saying that there have been experiments where identical photographs have been manipulated by researchers so that the eye's just slightly bigger, and somehow the man rating it says this one's more attractive, even though he doesn't realize why?
Exactly. So in one very funny and famous example, a psychology textbook had two covers that looked identical. It was a beautiful woman's face, a young woman's face on it. But in half of the books, they had dilated the pupils of the eyes, and the others, they were small. And they just put these books out there, and they just asked men to pick up. They all look the same, and if you looked at them, they just all look the same. But they asked them, which one would you like to buy? And the men always, for reasons they didn't understand, they always picked out the books that had the females with the dilated pupils. So this goes on under the radar. And I spent a lot of time consulting for various corporations for many years, telling them this stuff, and they use it. You're being manipulated all the time in advertisements and at point of sale and everywhere. I've helped them do this. They know how to make things look attractive. I'm telling you a couple of these things. There's dozens and dozens of these things that can be used too. So companies are using evolutionary psychology in their products, the product design, the advertisements, the videos that they put online, and so forth. So yeah, this is a case where evolutionary psychology has proven its worth so well that companies are paying big bucks to use this stuff.
I see. And now, sometimes we see things, or other animals see things that you might call super stimuli. So things that resemble certain features that normally in most circumstances indicate some high potential fitness payoff, but are nonetheless not attached to an actual fitness payoff. You gave a really interesting example that I had not heard about before of these things called jewel beetles. And so, what
Right.
is that example, and what is that actually telling us?
So this is the phenomenon called supernormal stimuli
Hmm.
in evolutionary theory. And these are the cases where what seems to be going on is that the visual system, the sensory systems of organisms do need to do things quickly and with as few calories as possible. So we try to, find heuristics and tricks, shortcuts to get to the answer. So instead of giving, a detailed analysis of exactly the optimal eye and so forth, we might evolve some shortcuts. The bigger the eye, the better. The bigger the pupil, the better. In other words, there may be these sort of shortcut that are built into the computation, so you can get the computation done right and quickly. And even if you get it wrong a little bit, the fact that you can do it quickly and most of the time you're right, it should be good enough. So there's a trade-off between the most accurate kind of representation versus how quickly and how cheaply you can do it. So, and we see this in the case of the jewel beetle. So this is a beetle in the outback of Western Australia. The beetles are dimpled, glossy, and brown. The males fly, the females are flightless, but the males fly around and looking, for eligible females, and if he finds one, he alights and mates. But it turns out that in the outback there were also, men who liked to drink beer, and they had these beer bottles called stubbies that were also dimpled, glossy, and just the right shade of brown. And so the guys would toss the empties out into the outback. And it turned out that the jewel beetle males would flock all over these bottles trying to mate. So they had full body contact with the bottles and they would try to mate. And the females weren't interesting because this was a super female, apparently, to these male jewel beetles. So the species could have gone extinct. They had to, remove the bottles and change the bottles to save the species. So here's a remarkable thing that, the jewel beetle had been around, countless thousands, maybe even millions of years. The males had successfully found and mated with eligible females for that whole time. You'd think that evolution had taught the males to know and recognize what a real female is, and apparently not. It just gave the male jewel beetles a hack, a little trick. A female is anything dimpled, glossy, and brown. The bigger, the better. And so when they found this dimpled, glossy, brown bottle that was bigger than any normal female, that's a supernormal stimuli that was just far more attractive to them. And so even being on the bottle and trying to mate unsuccessfully didn't override these cues that they were using to determine attractiveness. And so we have the whole makeup industry is based on supernormal stimuli. So women will put on lipstick that makes lips a shade of red, for example, that would never occur in nature. But men find it more attractive, right? So there's something going on there, right? Red lips are certainly healthier than blue lips. They indicate a degree of oxygenation in the blood and therefore health. But what you have in makeup is you take the cues that males are using to find females attractive and making them go even beyond what would ever occur in nature. The same thing happens with the kinds of cosmetic surgery that you might, artificial implants and so forth will also do this kind of thing. So we use supernormal stimuli all the time in makeup and so forth. So yeah.